You're welcome to the masterclass today. And today we're going to be looking at financial sustainability for NGOs. So I believe it's a very important topic, especially given the uncertainties around resource mobilization and granting and getting the right resources for our organizations. And how do we continue to exist when this external funding stops? So what are the other ways that we can generate the right resources for us to continue doing the things that we've set out to do? So that's what we're going to be looking at. So I want to welcome every one of you for joining us again after a long while. We've had weekends where we've had to cancel the masterclass for some reasons, but I'm glad that we're able to come back again and that we're able to do this today. So for those of you just joining, my name is Vincent Egoro, and this is the NGO Masterclass. So thank you for joining. All right, so today, what we're going to be looking at is we're going to be looking at introduction to sustainability. We're going to look at the challenges of achieving financial sustainability in NGOs. We're also going to be looking at the fundamental pillars of financial sustainability in an organization and requirements for achieving financial sustainability. So what are those requirements that you need to have? What are the fundamental pillars that need to be in place? And what are some of the challenges that NGOs face in financial sustainability? So I know that many of us already have financial sustainability plans. We've done trainings upon trainings around resource mobilization and financial sustainability. Perhaps what you're going to hear may not be anything new, but I feel that considering the turbulence that we are experiencing globally, there's is not enough to hear something once, and considering also how important the topic of sustainability is, it's not something that we should be tired of hearing. And I also like to hear from you, your own experiences. If your own organization have achieved financial sustainability, how did you do it so that other persons can benefit from your organization and what you're doing as well? So let's look at in the introduction to sustainability. So we're living in a world of uncertainties, and I'm saying here that the only certainty is uncertainty. The only thing that is certain in the world today is the fact that there is a lot of uncertainty, and nobody understands what's happening globally. Even within Nigeria, we're in a very turbulent times with the elections coming and the uncertainties around the elections. Every time there's election, there's always uncertainty. And this also affects you as a development professional, as a humanitarian. It affects your organization as a founder, as a director, as a senior manager in that organization. So it is smart for your organization to develop the capacity to be resilient and adaptive. And this is even beyond organizations. As individuals, it's very important for us to think about how resilient are we and what our agility is in terms of how we are able to adapt with the changing times that we find ourselves now. So let's also look at sustainability. A lot of times when we mention sustainability, apart from the fact that for those who are into climate programming and climate change environment, so if you're within the environment space or within climate change, when you talk about sustainability, we're talking about climate change and all that. But generally, when we think about sustainability, most of the time people think that it is about fundraising, it's about resource mobilization. But money is just a part of the equation. And the reality is that you can't raise money without having a quality program, and you can't prove you have a quality program unless you can show results, and you cannot show results unless you have good management practices in place. So financial sustainability and sustainability in general is beyond fundraising. If you raise the funds, how do you manage these resources? If you raise the funds, who is going to give you funds when they are not sure about the quality of projects and programs that you're running? And also, who is going to give you funds when you do not have good management practices in place? So sustainability is many things that combine together to make something capable of lasting over time. There are many factors that need to take place, in order for you to achieve sustainability in your organization. Now, what is sustainability? And the word sustain or sustainability comes from the verb sustain, which the Webster's dictionary defines sustain as, to maintain, to keep alive, to support, to subsist, to nourish. That's the various ways you can use to define the word sustain. And broadly, we're saying that sustainability refers to the ability of administrators, people who are running an organization, to maintain that organization over the long term. So if you're here today and you're gone tomorrow, then there's no sustainability in place. So when we talk about sustainability, we mean that you should be able to maintain your organization over a long period of time. How are you ensuring that your organization survives beyond 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? I mean, for private companies like brands like Coca-Cola, let's just say Coca-Cola, Pepsi, and some of the other brands, they've been there for generations, for hundreds of years. I mean, in the West, you see companies, you see companies and organizations, even non-profits like NGOs that have been there for 4 generations, for 5 generations. Okay, they've been able to pass down, over and over and over, and they're still there. But unfortunately for us here in Africa and in Nigeria, it's difficult to see things, that are still there, even within the first generation. Okay, when the founder leaves, the organization dies because the founder is not there. So at most, when the founder leaves, another ED takes over. That ED is not able to maintain that organization, beyond when that person leaves. So how do you ensure that there is sustainability? That's what we want to look at now. That the organization lasts beyond you. Okay, that it stays and exists and is thriving even when the founder is no more there. So that's what makes an organization sustainable. So what are some of the challenges that NGOs face in terms of achieving financial sustainability? So let's just look at these, and then we'll look at the definition of what financial sustainability means. So every NGO strives to achieve financial sustainability, but very few organizations are able to achieve financial sustainability. And this is not as a result of a lack of creativity or as a result of you not having a vision. The major reason why NGOs are not achieving financial sustainability is because of what I've called the donor-dependent vision. Every organization in this country is donor-dependent. And so we strive to, we live for the donors. We do everything for the donors. Some of us cannot, we say that we have the passion, we're development professionals and we have the passion, but unfortunately, without donor financing, where is your passion? So without donor financing, that passion just dies. I mean, these are people who say, the reason why I'm setting up an NGO is because I like children. I want to see the less privileged in the society well taken care of. I want to see people go to school. But without money, without a donor coming to support that work, you're now unable to do that work. So that's why many organizations are unable to achieve financial sustainability, because they have a donor-dependent vision. But okay, so let's just continue. So one of the greatest challenges facing nonprofits, NGOs, and civil society organizations in developing countries like ours is that of obtaining critical funds to carry out the necessary activities to fulfill their vision. And these challenges exist both at the local level and the international level. So let me explain. For the international level, one of the challenges that we see is that funds are increasingly becoming scarce due to the growing need and the number of emerging organizations. So different NGOs are popping up. People are registering NGOs daily. Okay, people are opening up NGOs. They are moving to find their own nonprofit organizations, and this is increasingly making donor funds to become scarce because the needs are becoming bigger. Now, it's not as if the world's problems are increasing. So it's not like there are more problems than there used to be before in the past. No, what it now means is that there is more awareness about the problems of the world, and that's increasingly making resources to become scarce. And funds are also scarce because while there has been a quantitative increase in funds, there has not been an appropriate quantitative increase in donor funders, okay? So the funds increase, but the donor organizations are not increasing. It's usually the same set of donors that have been funding you in the past 20, 30 years are still the same donors who are funding now. USAID, DFID, Canadian government, Australian government, Japanese government, European Union, American government, they are still the same people. They are not like different people are entering the funding landscape, okay? So maybe these people, these same organizations, these same governments may increase the volume of funds. For instance, they could say, okay, we're going to earmark $1 billion for aid for 2023, but 2024 comes, it's still the same America. 2025 comes, still the same America. So we're not having different donor organizations entering the funding landscape. They may be increasing the amount of money that they are wanting to spend, but it's still the same people. And so that is why it's making funding to be scarce at the international level. Now, another challenge with the international level funds is that even where funds are available, donor interest determine how those funds are allocated. So they say he who pays the piper dictates his tune. So donors are dictating how and what we do with their monies. So they don't consult you. They don't consult you about what is the most important need that you have. Rather, they determine what need they want to spend. So you may have big needs in your communities about what you want to do, but the problem that you're facing as a local organization is that you have the needs, but there is no demand for your need. So you now find a situation whereby people are going after resources even in areas where it is outside of their mission. You're now tailoring the existence of your organization to suit donor resources. So that's a big challenge. You're going towards pursuing donor funds, and you're tailoring your work to suit where the funding is, because there are needs in your community, but there are no demands for those needs. It's an economic principle. Demand must meet supply. Now, you have a need, but there is no demand for that need. That means that there is a need, or you have problems, but people are not paying for those problems. Donors do not want to support those problems. And so rather than concentrate on those problems, you're now tailoring your existence to suit where the organizations are funding, where donors are funding. So that's a problem. So as a result, many organizations that are dependent on international funding sources are unable to maintain the continuity of their programs and activities, since funds allocations shift according to the interest of the donors. So these are some of the problems you're facing in raising funds. You also have issues around staff attrition, because we are so focused around donor funds, we will not be able to maintain the staff after the project ends. And so some of us are unable to get multi-year funding. We only get short-term funds, annual funds each year. So when those project ends, we are bound to let go of our staff. So we now have short-term hiring. You hire based on project. You do not have the right long-term staff to help you achieve your vision. So organizations accept these conditions because their alternatives are often limited. Either they take the money offered, or they will be unable to implement the project. And this is a story about many of us who are taking this training now. You don't have a choice. Your choices are limited. So if you don't pursue these funds, you're unable to implement any project. So the reason why you're unable to implement any project is because there is no money. And there is no money, not because there is no money in the ecosystem, but that there is no money coming from donors. You don't have donors who are willing to fund your projects. So these are some of the challenges that you face, attracting international funds. When we are so donor-driven, these are the challenges that we begin to face in our various organizations. Now, at the local, what then do you do? So you now see a situation whereby, because donors are not funding indirect costs, most times you see that even when you apply for grants, the donors tell you that they are not going to pay for salaries. They are not going to take up staff salaries. Okay? They are not going to pay for your overhead. They are not going to pay for administrative costs, the cost of running the organization, of buying diesel, of internet recharge, of communications. They don't want to fund that. And so you find yourself doing things like increasing the workload of existing staff in order to save on hiring new personnel. So because the budget is small, you're making your staff to overwork because you cannot hire. Your hands are tied. You cannot hire. Donors are not approving for you to hire. And then where most times you are incurring deficit, you're incurring losses because you're using your own small resources to cater for areas where donors are refusing to support, to fund. And then you also try to identify additional funding sources to supplement the international funds received. Okay, so these are some of the challenges that you face and some of the ways which we have been operating. While we may have been succeeding in operating in this way, it is not the best way. So you now have a lot of burnout from staff in your organizations. Staff are under-motivated to work because of the burdens that they are carrying as a result of donors being unwilling to cater for some of the other aspects of funds that you require in your organization. Now, raising funds also, using local resources, it's also been very difficult, for us in Africa especially, because NGOs are still growing. I mean, yes, you may have been existing in the past 30, 40 years, but within our communities, the culture of NGOs just started popping up with as a result of maybe the HIV/AIDS epidemic at the time, and then you had the insurgency that is going on. That's when civil society and NGO work began to be popularized. And most people, when they think about NGO activities, charitable activities, they are tying it to religion. So people rather give to religious causes. People give to church, people give to the mosques, but people do not want to give to charity in terms of supporting an NGO fundraising activity. Those are some of the challenges we face when we are trying to raise monies locally, because that culture is not, been endeared to the people in Nigeria, in Africa generally, unlike what you have in the West, where the culture, the giving culture is there, is part of the system, the government encourages it, and so on. So for us, it's often difficult mobilizing resources locally. Now, why is it difficult for us to mobilize resources locally? One, the lack of government incentive to encourage charitable contributions. What you see in the West, in America and in Europe, is that governments actively encourage people to give, and people get tax rebates. People get in. They are incentivized to give because it's now like a constitutional thing for them. So governments after governments encourage these things that people should give, because the government's also giving, making it public, and they have so many avenues where people are encouraged, trained even in their education systems to continue to give to charitable organizations. Now, another challenge why people are not giving locally is that in some cases, NGOs lack trustworthiness, even within our communities. There have been instances where civil CSOs and NGOs have been accused of misappropriating resources, of diverting resources that are meant for community work for their own, aggrandizement, for their own personal use. And so people are skeptical, people are weary of wanting to donate to organizations. Why? Because they feel that if they give this money to you, then you're not going to use it for the purpose with which you said you are going to use it. There are lack of accountabilities. We don't account for expenditure and publish it publicly to let our committee members to know that this is what we are doing. So because of that, there's a mistrust. And so the few who want to give are skeptical and weary of wanting to give because their monies may not go to the right places. And then there is a lack of government regulations to guarantee the transparency of NGOs. In as much as we hold government to account, in as much as we talk about upholding accountability and transparency within the civil society network, you and I will agree that there's still a lot that needs to be done. There's still a lot of opaqueness in terms of our work, in terms of how we report. How many of you in your annual reports that are published have your audited account and your financial statements? Not many people include their financial statements and audited accounts as part of their annual reports. And so you just write annual reports talking about the impact you've made, the number of people you've reached, but there is no detailed breakdown of your income that you receive, from whom you receive these sources, and how much you've spent, and how much has been left over. So that level of transparency is not there. And government is also unable to regulate the sector to produce that kind of transparency and accountability that you see obtainable in civil society organizations abroad. And now we also have a relatively small percentage of population with sufficient means to have extra income to donate. So people do not really have the monies to give, okay? Because of the high level of poverty rates, just a few segments of the population have an extra income that they want to donate, that they want to contribute for a cause. And then you have economic fluctuations and distrust of long-term saving plans. So people are unable to save long-term, and whenever they have resources, they want to prioritize the well-being of their families first before giving it to another person who is suffering. So if you come to say, okay, people are suffering in the Northeast, they'll tell you, are they the only ones suffering? We too, are we not suffering here? So that's the mindset, that's the culture that you find in the society that tends to inhibit giving to local causes, whereby for us as local civil societies, we have not been able to raise the desired money that we want. Now, bearing in mind what we just talked about, what then is financial sustainability? So we're saying that financial sustainability is an organization's capacity to obtain revenues, grants or otherwise, in order to sustain productive processes, as your projects, at a steady or growing rate in order to produce results. And so when we say you are financially sustainable, it means that you have the capacity to obtain steady revenues, steady resources, in order for you to accomplish your projects and produce results. So when that resources is not steady, when the funds that are coming to you are not steady, then you're not financially sustainable. Now, financial sustainability talks about the results you want to achieve and the means of achieving these results. When you are able to achieve these results, you have a plan that these are the things I want to achieve, and you have a means to achieve that, then you have the fundraising capacity. Okay, so you have a set of results you want to achieve, you know the means that you want to take to achieve them, and then you have the capacity to raise the funds to be able to achieve, to do the work that will be able to lead to those results. That's what financial sustainability means in a nutshell. How are you able to raise the money that you need to do the work that you want to do in your community so that you see the change, the benefits, and the results that you hope to see in those communities? Now, I have a question that I want us to answer. Is it not true that if we are non-profit organizations, we are not allowed to retain more money than we can spend? As an NGO, are you allowed to keep more money than you can spend? Are you allowed to make profit in your organization, even though you are a not-for-profit organization? Are you allowed to make profits? Is anybody who wants to try? Are you allowed to become profitable? You are a non-profit, but are you allowed to become profitable? Is there anybody who wants to share? You can just chat or you can raise your hand. I'm going to unmute you. I want to see responses. You can use the chat. You can raise your hand if you want to share. So, but are you allowed to make profit? Is it okay? Is it justifiable if you are able to retain more money than you are able to spend in your accounts as an organization? Okay, somebody want to share? Just a moment. All right, Kingsley, go ahead. Yeah, Kingsley, unmute yourself, please. Go ahead.
Okay, good morning, Vincent.
Yeah. Hello? We can't hear you. Kingsley, we can't hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, please go ahead. Ajamina, go ahead.
I think that one can make profit, but as long as it can be shown that it is being plowed back into the nonprofit organization for it to be able to carry out its projects, and not just. I think this is my.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Kingsley, you still want to try again before I continue? Okay, so let me. Okay, go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, Mr. Vincent, based on your question, I think there's no justification for us to say that we're non-for-profit organizations and then we save money more than the money we spent in our for projects. For the fact that we are saying we're non-profit, it's basically because of the passion we have jobs that we do every day. That is why we are saying it is for us to sacrifice, or we're making sacrifice, bringing our passion to play. That is why we're doing what we're doing for the communities we're working in. So at the end of it, if we're saving money more than what we are supposed to spend, then I think we are not justifying that non-profit organizations that we state in our organizations. So the problem, like you're discussing now, is the issue of sustainability, because most organizations now need to sustain rent, need to sustain staff, salaries or upkeep of the organization. That is why I think what drives a lot of organizations to want to make profit out of whatever project they're implementing. Well, I think for an organization to say that we're non-profit, there should be room for us to say, okay, if we're able to save at least for the running cost of the organization, depending when we're able to get sources, it should be that. But you find out that there are a lot of organizations that go beyond what is supposed to. You see organizations, individuals who own organizations, maybe the EDs or the founders of organizations, earning very, very expensive cars, building very, very mighty edifices or structures as their residential buildings. So it goes to tell people that some people are just going into the development work for the fact or for the reason of just to enrich themselves, not for the services they provide. So I think they, to a high level, some organizations, I wouldn't say all, I wouldn't want to write off everybody, but I think to a large extent, yeah.
Thank you. All right, Madam Rosemary, go ahead. Please, you can go up, you can unmute yourself.
Okay, we are not allowed to make profit. But the project is carefully planned. And if you do make profit by pinching some of the items, some of the budget line, it might affect the quality of the work.
Okay.
But recently, they have decided that when you are given a project, you should also include it in your policy. That any donor or any international partner that's engaging you is expected to give you 5% of your total budget at the end of the project. And we have been receiving a 5% of the total budget is given to you as part of your profit at the end of the project, which you can do anything you want to do. It will keep you for some times.
Okay. Thank you for the feedback. Yes, this is the last person now. Adek Basi, please go ahead.
Hi, everyone.
Yeah, good morning. Yep.
Yeah, talking about sustainability of finance, and I love the fact that it opened our eyes to me. The message I'm getting from this session is we should not just completely rely on donor fundings if we can actually get our organization sustained and get our impact work being done.
Yeah.
So having said that, to me, I don't know, I just stand to be corrected. I really want you who I perceive as the expert to maybe tell me I'm right. Because I think it's okay for an organization, a local organization, to develop an avenue or a strategy that they can do to generate income for themselves that will still be used to do their development of humanitarian work. Take, for example, the organization should be allowed to probably run up a for-profit agency or business or something, a structure that generate income for the organization. So that's what I feel should be allowed. And I'm really thinking towards that aspect, based on how we work and the need for money. Yeah, so
Okay.
I don't know if it's, I just time for you to correct. I just want to also say that I think it's okay for people to venture into profit stuff, even though you're a non-profit. As
All
long
right.
as it's going to give back to
Thank you so
society.
much. Thank you so much, everyone, for your contributions. And then there are two, okay, there are some comments here on the chat. One says, unless it is stated in the approved budget, example, institutional fee, donors do not allow implementing partners to make anything out of the budget. Organization can have business ventures, profit plowed back into the NGO, not taken from donor approved budgets. And then another person says, I think you will not be allowed except approved or institutional fees or have written to the funders on the remaining balance. All right, thank you all so much. Now, you all are all correct in different ways, and so I used to also think that way too, but because of this issue around financial sustainability, so I've done a lot of deep dive into literature to find out from materials, even from USAID, from the European Union, from some donors and very experienced organizations that are working in over 90 countries of the world. How do they do this? And what do they recommend to their partners? And even some funders, how much are they allowing people to utilize and so on? So that's that's one of the things I want to share. Now, based on what I discovered that the fact that you are a not-for-profit does not mean that you should be getting losses. You should be having minus account balances, or you should be having zero account balances. So being a not-for-profit does not mean that you should be making losses in your activities. So that's very important. Now, it is not true that because we are not-for-profit organization, we are not allowed to retain more money than we can spend. Now, what NGOs may not do is spend money for purposes unrelated to your mission or distribute profits for personal gain. Like, Kingsley mentioned about where founders and EDs are living luxurious lifestyles, provided, now, I don't think that because you're an NGO professional, you should not acquire luxury if you can afford it, provided, again, is not organizational resources. People are doing diverse things. People are doing private businesses. They are investing, and they are having multiple streams of income that, and like everybody who is able to afford certain things are dabbling into organization resources. Now, generating a surplus is not prohibited. That's what I found out, even from USAID. It is not prohibited. In fact, this resource that I'm using to share is from the research I got from documents produced by USAID, financed by USAID on financial sustainability. So it is not prohibited that as an organization, you should generate surplus, because surplus generation is a need. It is not a luxury. It is our obligation. It is our own obligation. It is crucial to planning for the future as well as meeting current challenges. Without an income surplus, you will not be able to respond to the changes in your surroundings, and you will not be able to respond to opportunities. You will not also be able to deal with risks and uncertainties when they arise in the future, because all you have, you spend everything that you're given, you utilize all that you have no savings, you have nothing left, everything is zero balance. It is not good for the future of the organization. And I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you why. As we go ahead, you're going to see what I mean so that I'm not being misinterpreted. Now, just to clarify, I'm not saying that you should go and take donor money and save it, because that's what I said. No, I'm going to show you. So as we go subsequently, you're going to see what I mean by surplus and how you can begin to achieve surplus in your organizations to cater for the seasons whereby grants are not going to come, whereby you need to sustain operations of your NGO. Now, financial sustainability of a non-profit organization, it's your capacity to obtain revenues in response to a demand in order to sustain productive processes at a steady or growing rate to produce results and obtain a surplus. So there has to be in balance. There has to be a balance that at the end of every year, there should be something that you're keeping, something that you're maintaining in order for you to achieve the achieve other things, to do other things that you want to carry out as an organization. So financial sustainability may be achieved at the project level, at a program level, or even at an organizational level. Financial sustainability means ensuring the longevity of your organization. So what we mean is that when you subtract your total income from your total expenses, what you should have is a surplus. So that what the overall income that comes to your organization, when you take out the overall expenses, the balance that left is what we refer to as surplus, something that you can use unrestricted, that you can use at your discretion to solve organization challenges without going back to meet the donor, and the donor says that, this is not allowed, this is not allowed, this is not allowed. So for you to achieve sustainability, it means that you should have, at the end of each financial year, you should have money left that you can reutilize as the organization deem fit to solve problems that will arise, to solve needs and challenges that donor funds may not cover. So that's very important for us to establish as we go ahead. You may not agree now, but I believe that at the end of the training, at the end of this session, you're going to see what I'm driving at and why you need to also have certain policies in your organizations to keep certain monies. Now, a few questions I want you to think about is, do you know if your organization has a surplus, a deficit, or a zero balance? That is, at the end of the year, if you look at the total operating budget, do you have money left, or are you always running at a deficit, or are you always running on a zero balance? If there is a surplus or deficit, do you know where it is coming from? Has financial sustainability been established as a goal? If so, has a financial goal been identified? How much money do you think you need to have as an organization to achieve financial sustainability each year? How much, when we talk about financial sustainability, it's not enough to say we need money, we need more money. How much of the money in Naira figure, in dollar figure, in euro figure, do you think you need to achieve financial sustainability? That's what you need to determine as an organization. So we need to move beyond having project budgets. Every year we have project budget. Do we have organizational budgets for the entire organization? Do we know how much income is coming in, how much we are expending as an organization, and how much is left each year as an organization for us to operate? Because there are cycles. There are going to be cycles where you're not going to get any funding. What then do you do when those cycles come? How are you going to ensure that you keep getting funding in your organization? Now, in order for you to achieve financial sustainability, there are certain pillars. There are certain pillars that need to be if you want to achieve financial sustainability. There are fundamental pillars of financial sustainability that every organization needs to have. Now, these pillars are so important. It's like a table. A table has 4 legs. If you knock off one leg, that table will not be able to stay in balance. That is how it is with regards to financial sustainability. That these pillars, strategic and financial planning, income diversification, sound administration and finance, and then your own income generation. If you don't have these 4 in place, you can never achieve financial sustainability. The same way a table with 4 legs, if you knock off one leg and the table has 3 legs, that table may not be able to carry itself and it will not support anything that you put on top of that table. Is that important? Okay? That when we think about, most of the time, we think that financial sustainability means increasing income streams or being effective in resource mobilization. Now, it is irrelevant whether we are good fundraisers or whether we are good at generating our own income. If we lack efficient procedures for administration and finance and fiscal planning in conjunction with strategic planning, if you do not have a strategic plan as well as a financial plan or a strategic financial plan, if you don't have it, it doesn't matter how good you are in proposal writing. It doesn't matter how good you are in resource mobilization. It also does not matter if you do not have sound administration and financial administration of finances in place. If you don't have sound procedures that will guide how you are able to manage your resources in your organization, then you will not achieve financial sustainability. Then you will also have a problem if you're unable to know how to generate your own income as an organization. So these 4 things must necessarily be in place if you must have financial sustainability. Without these 4 things, you will not achieve financial sustainability. And that's why most times, the first thing I want to ask you is that, how many of you have a strategic plan in your organizations? So let me just see people raise their hands up. If you have a strategic plan, just raise your hands. Let's see. Yep, okay, Kingsley, good. How many other persons have strategic plans? Okay. Okay. We're seeing people raise their hands up. Strategic plan, strategic plan, strategic plan in your organization. How many of us have strategic plans in our organizations? That's the first step in achieving sustainability, is that you need strategic plan. Now, we don't have compared to the number of persons who are here, there are just a few people who have strategic plans. Now, for those of you who have strategic plans, how many of those strategic plans have been costed to say this is the XYZ amount of money that we need in order for us to achieve these priorities that we've set in our strategic plan. Because I've seen that many times we just spend time, we bring people to do strategic plan for us, and then they go without developing a financial strategic plan. A financial plan is different from a budget. It talks about a plan that will tell you the minimum income that you need to raise if you are to achieve the objectives that you set out in your strategic plan. How many people have that document that accompanies the strategic plan developed? It's very important. I mean, for those of us who are heads of organizations, high-level members of organizations, do you have these documents in position? Because that's the first pillar that must exist if you will achieve financial sustainability. If not, you're just walking blindly. You know where you're going. For instance, you say, I want to travel to Lagos. And then you say, I'm going by air to Lagos. But you don't know how much a flight ticket is. How do you get there? You don't know how much it will cost you to arrive at Lagos in terms of your accommodation, your feeding. You don't know. So you will not arrive safely. You may not even be able to get a ticket because you may be thinking that tickets are still 25,000, 30,000, whereas they've increased the ticket rate. You may be thinking, okay, I'll get accommodation in the island for 7,000, for 10,000, and you may not achieve it. So it's very important. So one of the actions that I want you to do after this session is you want to go back to your organization and look at your strategic plan and develop a financial strategic plan for it. Because why do you need this? As your organization grows and you begin to do a number of activities, there's a tendency that you'll be carried away with the day-to-day management and lose sight of the long-range objectives. You will forget about the big picture and you're just focusing on the day-to-day challenges, the day-to-day activities that you're carrying out. So now, for those of you who are always looking out for funds, effective planning, especially having a strategic plan, is one of the prerequisites for accessing available international funds. You will donors will not interact with you where there is no strategic plan in place. Okay? Now, beyond a strategic plan, you need to have a financial strategic plan, an FSP. It's very important. It goes hand in hand with the organizational strategic plan. So please, you need to develop a strategic plan that will clarify your mission and objectives, as well as prioritize the actions that you need to take in order to accomplish those objectives. If you want to be serious about what we're talking about here, it's very important. Do you have a strategic plan? Have the high, medium, and low priorities been set as part of that strategic plan? Do you know how much it will cost to implement the actions described in the strategic plan? These are fundamental questions that you need to answer. Beyond having a strategic plan, how much will it cost you to implement that plan? That will tell you the amount of money that your organization needs to have. So I've said, along with a strategic plan, you need a financial plan. This is a dynamic document that changes frequently. So the plan will not be kept for 5 years, for 3 years. It's going to be reviewed every year because inflation and deflation will take place. So you're going to be reviewing that plan to see, is this budget still relevant? Now, the purpose of having a financial plan is to determine if your organization is going to have sufficient resources, in the medium term to meet the objectives described in the strategic plan. Are you sure you're able to generate the resources? What strategies do you need to put in place to raise the resources in order for you to achieve the objectives? the financial plan operates on the basis of scenarios. It shows you what is the minimum feasible amount of money that we can raise, and what also is the ideal amount of money that we can raise. If you know the minimum, then you could say, okay, if we are not able to raise the ideal, can we live with the minimum amount? So it's very important that you develop that. You know, if we are serious about having sustainability in our organizations, beyond a strategic plan, you need to also have a financial strategic plan, a document that guides you, that enables you to say, okay, this is how much money we need to raise. This is how much money we need, how much money in terms of grants that we need to be having every year. Every year, this is the minimum we need to have. So it's not enough to say, our business development team, our resource mobilization people are working, they are producing. Yesterday, we got a grant of 1 million. Last week, we got a grant of 2 million. Is that money enough to sustain the operations of the organization? Is that the minimum that you should be having? If you don't know the minimum, then anything will be acceptable. Whereas you may think that you are healthy, but if they examine you, you are not healthy enough. So that's what we're looking at here. So it's very, very important that you take that into consideration. Now, the second pillar that you need to have is income diversification. By income diversification here, we're not just talking about the internal income generation, but we are also talking about the number of income sources that provide our main funding. So how many sources of income do you have? How many are your sources? So if we look at the typical NGO sources of income, you'll be talking about the government institutional funders like USAID, EU, GIZ, the United Nations, all the agencies of the United Nations, and so on. You could also be talking about foundations, Makoto Foundation, Ford Foundation, the Gates Foundation, Dangote Foundation, and so on. You could also be talking about corporate funders, say financial institutions, companies, you know, that are now giving as part of their corporate social responsibilities. You could be talking about philanthropists, rich individuals who want to give. So those are some of the sources, typical sources that NGO funds are, that are always giving funds to NGOs. Now we're saying that it is important that you diversify your revenue sources to become more self-reliant, to be flexible and sustainable. And having a diverse revenue sources supports your autonomy, your flexibility, and your security as an NGO. Because donor funds are dwindling. And I know that many of you have experienced it recently. Look at, for those of you who have been doing family planning, reproductive health, okay? You see that the recent decision around repealing abortion in the United States, what is going to do to you is going to be that there's now going to be a lot of restrictions in terms of the amount of money that comes with reproductive health projects. So your family planning and projects around that area are going to see reduced funds. So how are you safe? With the results that we are beginning to see generated around HIV/AIDS programming, it also means that in the next 5-10 years, in the next 10 years, HIV/AIDS funds in Nigeria is going to drastically cut down. So what then do you do? How safe are you? Are you really safe? So it's one thing to celebrate getting institutional funds, but we are saying that it's very, very important that you think about having a basket of funding sources. And there are guidelines. So the guidelines that you need to aim for is that no one source of revenue should account for more than 25% of your total annual revenues. So you are not safe if a particular donor is giving you 50% of the entire funds that you need to operate as an organization. You may be celebrating getting grants, but if that particular grant is like 50% of your revenue, for some of you, that is like 100% of your revenue, you are not safe. So the standard is that not one single donor or source of revenue should account for more than 25% of your total revenue. You should be planning and striving for a broad funding base with at least 8 sources of funding. I know that you may be thinking, how is it possible to get 8 sources of funding? But it is possible, and I'm going to show you, and I'm going to show you in the subsequent slides what you should be aiming for. I believe that the time is going to allow us to get to that point where I show you what you need to be aiming for. Your unrestricted income should be significant and sufficient to cover more than 40% of your total annual budget. So if your major sources of incomes are restricted funds, then you have a problem, because by restricted funds, these are funds that comes through projects, through contracts, and grants that we get from government, that we get from foundations. And then they come with a lot of stipulation, with a lot of policies, what you need to do, what you can spend them on, what you cannot spend them on. And so as an organization, while you may be thriving on projects, as an organization, you are a very sick organization. You are a very unhealthy organization. And it means that anything happening to those projects, if the donor wakes up and pulls the plug on the project, then your NGO will back up and stop existing. So at least 60% of your total budget should come from 5 different sources. That's the ideal, that's the standard. Now, you may not get there, you don't have to get there overnight, but that you need to begin to start putting measures in place. If you are here listening to me and you're relying on one major project, then you are susceptible for disaster. If anything happens to that grant, if anything happens to that project, that organization stops to exist. Now, how donor dependent are you? Is a question I want to ask you. Now, in order for you to know your donor dependency, look at your total donor income divided by your total income as an organization times 100 would give you the amount in percentage of your total donor dependency. For example, if your total donor income is $200,000 and your total organizational income is $300,000, that means that your dependence is 67% and you are 2/3 donor dependent. So these are things that we need to think about. If you want to talk about financial sustainability, you need to answer this question: how donor dependent are you, or is your organization? Do you rely? Some of us may be at 100% donor dependent. 100% donor dependent. Without the donors, we don't exist. 100% donor dependent. And that's unhealthy for the organization. So, what are some of your potential sources of unrestricted revenues? So you have things like public contributions, sales of goods and services, attentive financial management. So we're going to talk about this later on in more detail and how organizations have been able to achieve this. We have organizations in Nigeria who are doing this actively. They are NGOs, they are actively doing this, and they've been able to sustain themselves over the years. And they can they can exist 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years without receiving a single donor grant, and they are fine. Now, the third pillar that you need to have is sound administration and finance. You need to invest in sound finance management. Sound is very important. So, knowing how to manage your resources is as essential to achieving financial sustainability as knowing how to generate the money. And so, for you to have efficient financial and administrative procedures in place, there are policies that you need to put in place. There are policies, okay? Policies that helps you make the most of your resources and ensure transparency in fiscal management. Now, look, when you have a policy in place, for most of us, you realize that, for instance, we worked with some organizations. They say they are not going to pay per diem. And so we told them, well, that we have a policy on per diem in our organization. And what they will demand is, let us see that policy. And provided they know that it's an organizational policy, they approve it. They approve for the per diem. So now, you need to have policies in place on indirect cost recovery. That tells you that as an organization, you are required to keep 5 to 20% of the total budget for your organization administration. In fact, MacArthur Foundation allows for up to 29% indirect cost that an organization can get from the funds that they will give them. So it's not 5%, okay? It's not 5%, but it's about how have we been able to develop those kind of policies in place. And so that when you're discussing with your donor, you show them your policy, that we have these policies in place. How then do we do about it? And because it's a policy thing, the donors will not stop it. The donors will only want to negotiate. To say, okay, well, we are not able to give you up to this amount, but this is what we are able to give you. Are you willing to accept it? So that way, these kind of policies, like the indirect cost recovery mechanism policies, they will help you in ensuring that you are able to manage project funds judiciously. And you are able to also generate resources through the financial management of your available assets. Some of you have office spaces that are just lying there. Your staff are not using them. You have spaces that are underutilized, but there is no policy that you've developed that talks about you being able to rent out these spaces to other people. You don't have those policies in place, so you can't rent them, they are there. So even when the donor comes and sees the office spaces and they are paying for it, because you have no policy and you are not occupying 100% of the spaces, you cannot also rent those spaces. But if you had a policy like that, if you have a policy like that in place, then you're able to discuss with your donors and say, this is our policy on asset utilization. It means that we are able to rent these things, rent this asset, rent this part of what we are having to other people and get money to support our administrative expenses. From the very beginning, you are transparent with your donors with regard to the policies that guides how funds are utilized, how funds are managed within the organization. Now, in many organizations, your accounting procedures are set up by projects or by donors, okay, because you're reporting to donors. Now, listen to this very carefully. Many of us do not have our own financial accounting system as an organization. All we have is the accounting system for donor, okay? So because we are reporting to the donors, the donors determine our how we operate. So we operate by project. We don't have an organizational budget. We only have project, and each of the project report to a particular budget. Okay, so if you want to find out what the overall budget is for the organization, we have to calculate everything that each project is bringing into place. I will now say this is the total budget for our organization. And I've said here that this is a very dangerous habit, okay, as it does not contain adequate controls for regular automatic review of the organization's financial standing. When your accounting system is donor-based, it can lead to errors. So as an organization, you need to have an accounting system that allows for double entry coding for donor report. So beyond the donor, you should have your own accounting system that you can bring your donor templates and integrate it into your own system. It's not that the donors now control how you manage accounts as an organization. You will report to donors per project, but your organization, when you're reporting to your board, you're not going to carry out USAID report and submit to the board. You're going to prepare a financial report for the entire organization to the board. So that's why you need to have sound administrative and accounting systems in place. I know that many of you will say, well, we are a subnational organization. We don't have resources to hire good accountants. Look, consider volunteer management. One thing that you have to take advantage of is the NYSC scheme. The NYSC scheme is a big volunteering system that we have in place, so that at every 3 months, you have a pool of coppers who will come in and work with you. Now, don't believe the notion that Nigerian graduates do not know anything. Within a particular a particular batch that comes to camp, they have sound coppers. People who have, there are coppers who have already gotten their ICANN. There are coppers with master's degree. There are coppers who schooled abroad. There are coppers who went to private schools. There are coppers who went to good universities in the country that you can take advantage of by writing to NYSC and giving NYSC detailed description of the type of copper that you want in your organization with the type of skills that they should send, and they will send those coppers to you. Not coppers that will be redundant, that you will now come and be teaching all the work for them to do. I'm talking about coppers who will come and add value to your organization. How much do they pay coppers in Nigeria? Most of them that they send to government offices, they do not even pay them. In the local government secretariats, they are idling away. They don't pay them. Local governments don't pay them because they believe that the national government, the federal government has already paid them stipends from stipends, yeah. So they don't pay them again. So what you'll be giving them is the stipends that you would give your volunteers. So that's one way, because you may not be able to afford an experienced accountant, but you can get somebody who is young, who is energetic, who is willing to learn, who will now help you in putting together some of these systems that you have in place. Now, here is an example of financial statements that your organization needs to have and they need to review periodically. You need to have a balance sheet. So as a director, you need to know what is our 6 monthly balance sheet, our operating balance. In July, you should see between January and June, and then by December, you should have seen, or by January next year, you should have seen between July and December of this year. You should also have your income and expenditure statement. This is produced for you every month or every 2 months. You should have access to your cash flow. How much, what's the stream, what's our cash flow like every month? How much is coming in? You should see your audit reports. And this should be seen when they are conducted. And ideally, audit reports are conducted at the end of each fiscal year. Okay? You should also have financial statement entries, and these are with the balance sheets that they will give you. You should have inventory control. Okay? Do you have an inventory control of all your assets, everything that you procured, computers, cameras, phones, everything that the organization has, chairs, tables? Do you have an inventory of all the things that you have in your organizations? You should also have a financial statement that shows your investments as an organization, if you have been investing, depending on the amount of risks, the significance, and the risks incurred. Do you know how much your investments as an organization have yielded? Then you should also talk about a statement that shows you your financing, how much you're being given, how much of your projects are being financed by which donor. You should also have your budget, your organizational budget that is prepared each year. Every organization should have an annual operating budget. Beyond what you have, your annual project budget, you should have an annual operating budget. And then you should have a budget verification, okay? A system whereby you're able to see quarterly what was approved in terms of the budget and what is the actual expenditure like on the budget. These are financial statements that you need to see every time. You need to see them periodically. Some will be monthly, some will be quarterly, some will be annually, some will be twice in a year. But so if you do not have your own financial accounting system in place and you're depending on the donor, you will not be able to have this kind of financial statements produced, 10 of them at a minimum. Now, you will need this beyond the quarterly reports, monthly reports, grant reports that you're writing to the donor. I'm talking about as an organization. Are you able to see? And that's why we say that every project manager, every executive director, every leader in the organization needs to go and take a course on financial management for non-finance managers, so that you'll be able to understand and ask questions when you are presented with these documents. You don't have to be a finance person to be able to analyze a financial statement. You don't have to. You need to have a grasp of it, of the basic finance management for people who are not finance professionals, so that you'll be able to read these statements and make contributions. And you'll be able to present a financial report to the board when you are not the accountant of the organization. So these are very important elements that we need to see. And so the fourth pillar, the fourth fundamental pillar of financial sustainability is your own income generation. Now, having your own income is one way with which you can diversify your revenue sources. So how can you generate unrestricted income? Income that the organization, not the donor, decides how to spend. So one way that big organizations do, which is something I really want to share with you people, is that you need to set aside reserves. Reserves, if you look at your financial statements or financial statements of organizations, you're going to see them. They are usually called general reserves, unrestricted reserves, general purpose fund, general fund, accumulated surplus, net assets. These are reserves. So whatever you call them in your financial statements, reserves are your buffer. They are your savings, your safety margins, your rainy day fund, your financial cushion, and your room to maneuver. An organization ideally has reserves that it can continue to operate in the face of sudden decreases in external funding, and also to give it the possibility to act on strategic opportunities not initially budgeted for, if and when they arise. So you need to set aside a fund, a reserve, monies that you will not touch for rainy day. And generally, it is accepted that small, mid-sized nonprofits should maintain a minimum operating reserve of 25% of their annual expenses. You don't need to eat everything. You don't need to spend everything. Now, for those of you who have been able to get 5%, 10%, 7% indirect funding, what are you doing with those resources? Are you building up reserves, or you're just using it to expend as you get the money? So this one, we are not, there's no restriction on how we spend it, so let's go ahead and spend it. Is that what we do? Or are we pulling aside and having reserves to say, okay, for rainy day, for the period where we are not going to get funding, that's when we are going to pull those resources out? Now, in order for you to have a reserve, you need to have a policy for reserves. And this policy is going to show the current amount of your available financial cushion, the ideal amount of reserves you should have, the reasons or circumstances that support that ideal level or amount, where the reserves will come from, that is, should you be getting this money to save? How will you manage your reserves? What are the various processes for assessing reserves? So that you don't wake up and just say, because we have reserve, let's use it and pay salaries. There has to be processes so that it restricts you. You know, when we talk about reserve, think about the external reserves that Nigeria should have ordinarily, that is depleting every day. That for the money that the government is making from oil, they are supposed to set aside a specific amount of money and save it outside of this country, so that when there are big issues, the country can pool those monies, take out a small chunk and solve those issues. That's what we mean by reserve. You should also talk about the level of reserves that will be monitored throughout the year, and the reserve policy and the target of the ideal reserve level, which you're going to be reviewing every year to ensure that these reserves still meet your organization's changing needs and circumstances. So when I say set up a reserve, I'm not saying that the money that is left over and you're using it to pay salary. I said no, that you must have a savings culture where you take out a chunk of money each year and put it in an account that you're not touching. It could be fixed. You're not touching it. It's there. That reserve could be yielding income for you. It's there. You're not touching it. And you have policies that state certain conditions that must be met before you go and tap into that reserve, so that in case projects stop coming, you would have significant amount of money in your reserve, such that you can pull from there and still continue to exist as an organization. This is a culture that we do not have, but it's a culture that international organizations at their HQ do have. and they pool this reserve and support their country offices where the offices do not have funds to operate. So this is the culture that you need to begin to inculcate. So I don't know how many people here have reserve funds. There's been a hand here. So Namak, your hand has been up. You can go ahead. While others ponder, how many of us do have reserve funds? If you don't have it, you need to begin to think about having it. Having the policy first of how to create a reserve from the savings that you're making. Do you eat all those savings, or do you have a policy that says we have to keep reserves for when we're not going to get projects? And we are not going to use that money because we have it there. It is going to be in a separate account whereby, in case we do not have projects, we can pull from there and begin to utilize some of them, not all. Now, a reserve policy explains to existing and potential funders and donors why you are holding a particular amount of reserves. A good reserve policy gives confidence to stakeholders that your finances are being managed proactively and responsibly. Many of our national organizations do not have reserves. They don't have reserves. So as the money comes, they want to burn everything, even with the okay, Kingsley said, we have a reserve, but at most times it is used for payment of salary. Now, if you use a reserve to pay all the salary that year, it means that next year you're out of the funds. So you've taken the first step to have the reserve, but now you need to have a policy that justifies that reserve and certain conditions, you know, and a minimum amount that you can take out or a maximum amount that you can take out each year, and a minimum balance that must be in that reserve account. Yeah, Friday, you can go ahead, sir, unmute yourself.
All right, thank you, Vincent, for this elaborate analysis of financial sustainability for NGOs. Well, my concern is largely with us, national organizations. Yeah. So when you, I have concern when you talk of reserve. It's quite difficult for us, we in the national NGO, to achieve, especially we that are conducting humanitarian action and response. Now, there's a big distinction between the INGOs and the NGOs and the national NGOs. For instance, I write a proposal. The INGOs get 7% to their HQ, but me that I'm a national organization don't get anything. They tell you not to put it because you are in country. So it's difficult. It's quite difficult to save with that kind of policy. But anyway, with the localization agenda, I hope things will take their proper shape. Then, in addition, now going to development organizations. Now, there's this practice that development organizations engage in that I found very repulsive and appalling. For instance, now, in the name of trying to meet donors' bond rate to demonstrate that you are working, people now, instead of holding trainings in Abuja and in a cheap hotel that you can conserve, people now take trainings to Lagos where they pay flight and all those things. Can that money, those monies be saved, and then the organization, the donors give the organizations the privilege and the right to save this money instead of going to burn it and pay and enrich hotel people and enrich flight owners. Those things I find very appalling, sincerely. And it is the international of the donors that are responsible for it, because they put a lot of checks and balances to ensure that you burn. And once you are not achieving that burn rate, to them, it means you are not implementing. I've had, because some organizations carrying out and conducting activities or implementation of projects are very prudent. And so in the quest to prudently manage resources, then you go a long way to cut the cost. But then donors doesn't appreciate, because if you are not seen to be spending the money, it means you are not doing the work. That for me is a thing that organizations, national organizations, as well advocating for localization, should be, and if we should have a formidable front, to address these things at that international level and conduct advocacies around it. If not, this financial sustainability we're talking about, it will not be achieved the way the NGOs and the donor communities are going about it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Friday. So now, the issues around sustainability and not being able to get, let's say 7%, it has to do with our lack of awareness of the fact that it is within our right to negotiate some of these things if we have a policy for them. Now, I'm saying this because we've had interactions with some donors, and I've also seen donor literature, what they allow to applicants who are writing for these grants. But the challenge that we have is many of our organizations do not even have a policy for indirect cost recovery mechanisms. For instance, in our organizations where you and I are from, we don't have a policy, an organizational policy for indirect cost recovery. And this is something that we're now starting to do now, after an assessment that was done, and it's now the policy is being made. So imagine if that policy had been in existence for some time, and when you're writing a proposal, when the donor says it's not allowed, you're showing the donor, it's okay, but we have a policy for indirect cost recovery. What do we do? The donor may say, well, I will still not allow it, or since you have a policy, I'm going to give you 1%, I'm going to give you 2%, I'm going to give you 3%, as the case may be. I'm not going to give you 7% or thereabout. Donors usually take advantage of our ignorance of our rights to do what they do. If, for instance, you go to a court of law and you have a case and you have a lawyer, and the judge knows that you are innocent, but the judge is not going to pronounce you innocent when your lawyer is unable to provide evidence to show that you are innocent. The judge knows that I'm sending an innocent man to jail, but it's not on the judge to prove your case to himself or herself that you are innocent. It is now rest on the onus is on your lawyer to prove to the court that this person is innocent. And that's what policies do. Policies are like lawyers, showing donors that, look, we have a policy for this. And that's why it's in our policy that for every grant that we are applying, we should do this, we should request for this amount of money. Are you going to not give it to us even when we have a policy for it? If the donor says, okay, suspend your policy, then you can. Do you know why they give INGOs for their HQ? They give them because at their HQ, those INGOs have those policies, and the donors know, because they are in the same environment with these INGOs, they know that those policies do exist. And that's why I am sharing this information now to everyone who is in a national organization or a subnational organization, that policies need to be in place. If you want to take advantage of these things, go and develop your policies, get them approved, and when the donors are coming, show them your policies. Let them know that we have a policies, that we have to create a reserve. Now, in terms of creating a reserve, I think that if an organization has a culture for saving, that organization will create reserve, because in every, just like you've talked about now, and say, okay, there are people are burning in the name of burn rate, they are spending their travel costs and so on, because if they do that, so now, what about these organizations that are spending less? They are spending less. And even when the donor says, take this money, they just go on a spending spree. With all that money that they do not say take it, they go on a spending spree. They are maybe giving bonuses to staff. They are buying bigger phones. They are changing laptops. They are changing operational vehicles and so on. That's what most people do with these monies. But what I'm trying to let you know is that however you get that money from, whether you underspend and they do not ask you to take it, you need to have a policy for creating a reserve fund, a reserve. When you have that reserve, you put it and you say, okay, for every money that we get from, let's say we get from indirect costs or any money that we get from our own internal fundraising campaigns that we do, we are going to keep aside 10% or 20% of that fund into our reserve, and we're not going to touch it. That's what I mean here by having a reserve. Is it easy for you to do? No, but it takes a lot of discipline and strong financial and administration capacities of our NGOs for us to know that if my organization is going to stay beyond 10 years, beyond 20 years, then I need to begin to put certain strategies in place that I'm not going to be spending everything. Now, another thing that you can do to achieve financial sustainability is through contributions to a trust or endowment fund. Now, most people, some organizations have created an endowment fund, or they've created a trust fund, whereby monies that they've generated from their services, monies that they've raised, monies that have been given to them from project implementation that they've saved, and donors have said, okay, they can keep this, it's unrestricted. They now invest those funds. They invest those funds, okay, to generate interest. They are able to use the interest back into the organization, but they do not touch that capital. That capital is kept there perpetually to be generating interest for that organization. So they may say, okay, we are going to create an educational trust fund whereby we'll raise money and we'll invest that money to be able to put children back to school. The capital is never touched, but every interest we generate from that capital, we'll use it to sponsor a child back to school. So you could say, okay, just like you have the reserve, you could say, we are going to, for every of our indirect funds that we get from projects, we are going to use 10% of those funds to create a trust fund that we are going to help people who are victims of sexual and gender-based violence, or people who are victims of domestic violence, or people who are victims of insurgency and so on. Now, this is where some of your partners are giving you projects from, okay? And the projects are not USAID or UNICEF or UNHCR or EU, but they tell you that this is from our own internal funds as an organization. This is the idea. This is where they get the funds from, because they've set aside funds and created a fund whereby they will use those monies to help support their local partners. They will take that monies from there and support their local partners. And I'm sharing this information that it's time for us to start thinking strategically and acting like the big players do, the NGOs that we know. This is what they do. And for you to create a reserve fund, you need to have a policy on, for you to create a trust fund, you also need to have a policy on trust fund. And you need to research, go back and research FIRS guideline on how NGOs can create trust funds so that you will not be in conflict with the government. So you need to research, and if you look at the FIRS Act and also what the guidelines that FIRS have issued with regards to non-profits, NGOs, and civil society organizations, you can see what you can do and how you can rechannel your funds. The reason why we are not doing them is not because these things do not exist. It's because we are ignorant. We have not spent the time to research how we can take advantage of the provisions of the law to further our cause as NGOs. So it's not everything that is illegal. Some things are within your right, but when you're ignorant of your rights, you act the same way like somebody who thinks that these things are illegal to them. Now, another way for you to earn your income is through fundraising for institution building or operations. Okay, so this we're talking about requesting donations from those individuals, corporations, or agencies willing to make contributions in support of institutional development of the organization. So they are going to give you funds to help you increase your income generation capacity by hiring new staff, by acquiring assets in your organization. They can help you to even create that trust fund or endowment fund that we're talking about. They can contribute to your unrestricted funds for a specific period of time. Maybe you're a new organization, you've just set up. You can request for help from organizations. We've seen some of our national organizations which have been able to build befitting structures, edifices as their own headquarters through what? Being able to source for institutional building funds. These funds are not very popular because not many organizations want to fund you to go and develop yourself. They would rather fund you to support communities. But do they do this? Yes. Now, how would you be able to do this? You need to, when you're interacting with your partners, Jibril, I will answer that question later, and I'll also throw it out. There are people here who will be able to generate surplus from grants, and they are going to share their experiences as well. So let me just go through this presentation for want of time, and then I'll stop. So I've said that you can ask them to contribute to unrestricted funding for you. You can request this specifically or directly from from your donors. There are proposals, call for proposals. There are people who are willing to fund institutional development, who are willing to fund you or allow you to use leftover funds to develop yourself. I think even people like Makoto Foundation, Ford Foundation, they empower local partners to be able to strengthen themselves with the funds that are left over, in the project. Maybe you had foreign exchange gains. If you write to them that, look, we have a need, we want to use these resources that we've made gains from foreign exchange, we want to use it to build our office, they may say yes to it, and you now use it to begin to develop your own organization. It's almost 1 o'clock, and so I just want to take quick questions, and I'm stopping the training here to hear from you, to get feedback from everyone and take quick questions. But since I've not been able to exhaust what I have, I'll still continue on this again next weekend. But now I want to stop here. Jibril, your question is, how do we generate surplus from grants? So now, one of the ways to do that is through indirect funding that is given to you. Indirect funds. Sometimes donors allow 5%, 4%, 10% of the overall budget and say that you can use it to spend as your own administrative cost. So that way you're able to now generate surpluses. Other ways people do it is through foreign exchange gains. If they're giving you monies in they are giving you funds in international currencies, and you agreed on a certain exchange rate. Now you look at naira to dollar is around 618 naira, but when we are calculating funds, we use the official exchange rate of 416 naira or thereabout. So you now have like 200 naira difference in all the projects that you have. So there is a possibility for you to make foreign exchange gains, and you're able to plow that back in your organization. Now, it's important, some of you have partners who have been supporting you, who have been talking to you to achieve financial sustainability. You need to sit down with your partners and ask them, how were you able to achieve financial sustainability? How are you managing your grants in such a way that you are able to still have unrestricted funds from those grants. That's some of an assignment I'm giving to you. Go and meet your funding partners who are operating in Nigeria, who are maybe national NGOs or who have dual identity, and ask them this question. But I would like to get feedback from anybody here who has managed funds and they were able to save from their grants. How were you able to do it, and how was that money helpful to your organization? Thank you. So you can unmute yourself and speak. Or you can send your feedback in the chat. Anybody wants to share with us? Anybody with any experience they want to share? Or anybody wants to share some key takeaways from the sessions? If there are some things they are doing already, if there are some things that are new and they feel that they are going to try as you go back. Is there anybody like that who wants to share? Yeah, Kinsley, go ahead, please. Hello, Kinsley, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Vincent, for the session. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Yes. My own takeaway is the reserve, and then of course also the 7% and whatever that donors normally allow. Some donors that you mentioned that some donors allow that some of us don't even know about these things that are existing. I think that would be my take home. That we'll try and see how also we could maybe probably like create or make policies that could help us attract those fundings to our own organizations. Because I think that over time has been a problem. You write a proposal, you make a budget line that suits in the activities and then the expenditures you want to have for the budget. And then at the end of the day, when you finish doing all implementing the project, you are left with nothing. Probably like us, in some cases, some projects we do some savings through maybe probably salaries. We could say, okay, probably on a particular project, we could decide to say, okay, since staff are already placed on a salary and then there's a project salary, we would want to save from such, from that salary, probably not pay all, but then of course give part of the payment to staff, in order to save for rainy days. My own also to add to is, please, I'd want to ask, I'm always an Oliver Twist. You have given too much to us on this particular platform, but I would want to ask if probably if you have some of those policies, some of those documents, because I think that is one of the things I am trying to build for my organization now, issues of policies, because it's part of what EU Act is doing currently, trying to see that to build the capacity of organizations to develop policies to set up their own way of running their own organizations, independent of international donors. So I'm of the request that if you have some of these policies, you can share with us some of these policies that we can look at and then probably adopt as working documents for our organizations. I'll be grateful. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Oguru. I think in addition to what Mr. Kingsley has just mentioned, there is also this thing I want to add. We are you know, like being national organizations, we tend to like have more like to say, show our desperation to donors' funds, rather than really focusing more on, okay, what are our policies? I mean, like what are our take out from that project? What are our what are the things that we really want to do from that policy? And also, you know, our also level of negotiation, I think, is really low. We need to really improve on that aspect as well. We need to like focus more on the bigger picture and what we want to do, not really to rely on what the funds need to do. Although that in essence also, you know, sometimes, you know, we have this fear that, okay, if I want to do something that the funder does not want me to do, okay, like the funder says, this is what I want you to do, and of doing those things. So there's a fear of, okay, of losing that fund to other implementing organizations. So we have also that fear. So I think it's for us to really look back in our policies, and I'm really looking forward, you know, to having, you know, more sessions on this, you know, to see, okay, what are the kind of policies that we need to do, and also how do we go about negotiating those funds with the funders. I think I find this very interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the contribution. I appreciate it.
And explaining all this to us. Thank you very much.
All right. So I want to thank everybody who's stayed to this point for your time. Somebody says, my take home is on indirect cost policy for the organization, especially regards to donors giving NGOs at least 5% of project cost. Even though we work with Marketing Fund and Ford, we did not know about it. Thanks for the information. Yeah, so I want to thank everybody who stayed to this point and for your contribution and participation. So thank you, and do have a wonderful day ahead. We'll see you again on Saturday to continue and complete this session. Thank you.